Shen Yue's bag found floating in a river. Miles Wei refuses to believe she is missing. The sirens split the cold morning air long before the public realized what had truly happened to Shen Yue. At exactly 5:42 a.m., a fisherman at the outskirts of Suzhou's West River spotted something drifting close to the bank. Something small, pink, and heartbreakingly familiar.
It was Shen Yue's handbag.
The same bag she was last seen holding the night before, during the heated confrontation that occurred after the hidden camera was discovered in her apartment, and the same night Miles Wei stepped out to track down the person he believed was still following her. But Shen Yue never made it home. The bag had been torn open at the strap. Items were missing. Mud stained the edges, as if it had been dragged. Police marked the area, taped off the riverbank, and began searching the water for any sign of her. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. But the person who refused to accept what everyone else believed was Miles Wei. He didn't even wait for the police report. The moment a production assistant shakily told him, "Her bag, it was found in the river," he didn't reply. He didn't breathe. He ran. And that was only the beginning of the chaos. The scene at the river. Miles arrives, and everyone feels the shift by the time Miles reached the river. The place was crawling with officers and search personnel, but all of them froze when they saw him. His face was pale, almost colorless. His hands were trembling. But his voice, when he finally spoke, it wasn't the voice of an actor, or even a man in shock. It was the rigid, lethal voice of someone who had seen this pattern before. Someone who understood the danger far better than he ever admitted. "Where is she?" Miles demanded. One of the officers, a calm, older man, tried to explain. "Mr. Wei, we're doing everything we can. The bag was found floating. That bag didn't float here on its own." His tone cut like glass. Everyone watched as Miles knelt in the mud, eyes locked on the muddy pink strap dangling from the fisherman's net. He didn't touch it. He didn't speak. He simply stared, as though trying to burn the memory into his mind. Then he stood up and said the words nobody expected. "She's not in that river." The night she vanished, everything is connected. To understand why Miles was so certain Shen Yue wasn't in the water, you'd need to rewind the night before. It wasn't just a normal evening. It was the night the broken hidden camera, the same one they had smashed in anger and fear, finally revealed the truth neither of them were ready to face. Someone had been inside her home. Someone had been watching her sleep. Someone had been recording her phone calls, her outfits, her movements, even the way she walked from set to her car. And someone knew the exact moment Miles left to look for the stalker. Shen Yue left her apartment 10 minutes later, alone. CCTV caught her walking down the street, holding that same pink bag tightly against her chest. Police said she seemed anxious. She kept looking behind her. But then the footage simply cut off. The next camera, 2 streets over, never recorded her. It recorded only an empty sidewalk. Why Miles refuses to accept the missing label while the police worked the riverbank, dragging nets through the slow current, Miles paced the edge like a caged animal. But every movement he made was calculated. Every breath was controlled. Because Miles wasn't thinking like a grieving partner. He was thinking like a man who knew they were running out of time. The director approached carefully. "Miles, maybe you should sit down. You're in shock." "No," Miles said stiffly. "If she fell in, the bag would have been waterlogged. It wasn't. Look at it. It was placed there. Someone wanted us to find it." The officers exchanged quiet, uneasy glances, because he was right. The bag was too clean inside. Too intact. Too deliberate. This wasn't random. This was a message. One meant specifically for him. The note that changed everything at 8:17 a.m., just when the police were preparing to move their search further downstream, a junior officer found something wedged in a cluster of reeds. A scrap of wet paper. Barely legible. Barely intact. But the handwriting. Miles recognized it instantly. It wasn't Shen Yue's. It was the same handwriting found near the smashed window during Shen Yue's break-in. It was the same handwriting seen on the threatening note stuffed into her dressing room locker the week before. A simple message. "Stop looking." Miles almost tore the paper in half with fury. "They want me to think she's gone," he whispered. His voice cracked just slightly. But she's not. The flashback. Miles remembers Shen Yue's last words. The article must rhyme with previous stories. So here is the connecting emotional thread. The night before she vanished, Shen Yue grabbed Miles' wrist with trembling fingers and whispered, "Please don't let this get worse. Promise me you won't go after them alone." Miles had nodded. He had lied. Because that same night, he slipped out to confront the stalker he believed was responsible for everything: the break-in, the hidden camera, the masked figure caught near her apartment, and the strange car that kept circling the studio. But while he searched for the threat found her. Miles replayed those moments over and over, feeling the guilt stab deeper each time. "I should have stayed with her," he said under his breath. But guilt wasn't going to bring her back. Action would. The moment the investigation takes a dark turn, just when the officers were preparing to brief Miles on the ongoing search, an investigator pulled the police captain aside. Quietly, urgently. Miles saw the shift in their posture immediately, the subtle nod, the glance in his direction, the way they lowered their voices. He walked straight toward them. "What did you find?" he demanded. The captain hesitated. That alone was enough to terrify everyone around. "Mr. Wei, the footage didn't stop because of a malfunction. It was manually disabled." Miles froze. "And it wasn't done by an amateur," the captain continued. "This person knew exactly which camera to disable to make Shen Yue disappear without witnesses." A beat of silence. Then the captain added, "And this wasn't the work of a stalker. This was coordinated." Miles' jaw clenched so hard the muscle twitched. Everything connected at once: the notes, the break-in, the hidden camera, the intruder, the attack outside the studio, the person following Shen Yue home. "This isn't just someone obsessed with her," Miles breathed. "This is someone with a plan." The breakdown. Everyone remembers the riverbank was silent when Miles suddenly stepped backward, face drained of all color, body shaking like he'd been hit. He wasn't crying. He wasn't yelling. He was unraveling. But the unraveling wasn't emotional. It was strategic. His breathing steadied. His gaze sharpened. His posture straightened. And then, in the most chilling moment of that morning, Miles lifted his head and said quietly, "Then they made a mistake." The captain frowned. "What mistake?" Miles stared at the river, at the bag, at the reeds. "They made me believe she was dead." He looked the officer dead in the eye. "And now I won't stop until I find her." The final twist of part one. Just as the police moved to widen their search radius, an officer returned with a sealed evidence bag. Inside it, a second item pulled from the river. A thin silver chain. Shen Yue's necklace. But it wasn't broken. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't ripped off. It had been unclasped. Miles stared at it for a long, brutal moment, then whispered, "She left this as a signal." Everyone froze. "Shen Yue unclasped her necklace to tell me she's alive," Miles continued. "And that means someone forced her to go with them." The river suddenly felt colder. The air felt tighter. Because if Shen Yue wasn't dead, she was being held. Somewhere. By someone who had been in her home, following her, recording her, watching her sleep, and now had escalated to kidnapping. Miles took one step toward the police car. "I'm going with you," he said. "And I don't care what protocol says." No one tried to stop him. Because everyone finally understood. This wasn't just a missing person case. This was war. And Miles Wei had just declared it. The river was supposed to be silent at dawn, but that morning it felt like the whole world was breathing too loudly. The mist shifted like something alive, curling around the searchlights, swallowing the shapes of officers moving back and forth. And in the middle of all that movement stood Miles Wei, unmoving, unblinking, and dangerously close to losing the last thread holding him together. But no one dared to interrupt him. Not after what he had already seen that morning. The more the police searched, the more the river seemed to taunt them with its calm surface. It was like the water itself was hiding secrets, refusing to ripple, refusing to reveal anything else. Every so often an officer would call out, "Something here," and everyone would freeze, only to deflate again when it turned out to be a floating branch or a plastic bottle. But the tension remained razor-sharp. Because the bag wasn't enough. because Shen Yue was still nowhere. And because Miles wasn't reacting like a man who was grieving. He was reacting like a man who was remembering. The memory that haunts him. And why this isn't random. Miles clenched and unclenched his fists, trying to tame the shaking. But it wasn't shock. It was anticipation.
Fear.
Fury. Something darker. Because 5 years ago, something eerily similar had happened on another set, to another actress he cared about. Only that time, it ended differently. Miles closed his eyes for a second, just enough to suppress the memory. The flashback was quick, violent, and bitter. A missing actress. A staged scene. A personal item dropped near water. A search designed to waste time. A threat sent directly to him. He had seen this pattern before, which was why he knew whoever staged Shen Yue's disappearance wasn't trying to hide her. They were trying to hurt him. And he knew exactly who might be behind it. His breath hitched.
Not now.
Not here. He forced himself back into the present. The moment he finally breaks, then rebuilds. The officer nearest him flinched when Miles suddenly dragged both hands through his hair, gripping tightly, his elbows trembling. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, it was raw, unfiltered. A man trying not to scream. Miles, the director whispered behind him. Miles didn't react. Not until a young female officer came running from the embankment holding something cloth-like. "Mr. Wei, we found this caught between two rocks." Miles turned. Slowly, as though his entire skeleton had to force itself to move. She opened the evidence bag. Inside was a strand of Shen Yue's jacket fabric, the jacket she wore last night. The world tilted. Miles stumbled backward and had to brace himself against a tree, his chest rising and falling too fast. Not crying, no, crying would have been easier. This was something else. Something like the beginning of a storm trapped inside a human body. He whispered, "She didn't fall. Someone dragged her." The officer swallowed. "We believe so." That was it. That was the crack. Miles' voice didn't rise. His face didn't twist. He simply straightened. And for the first time since he arrived, he looked dangerous. "We're wasting time searching the river," he said sharply. "This is staged. Every piece of this is staged." The captain approached him slowly, cautiously. "Mr. Wei, we understand your attachment, but we can't rule out." "You want something to rule out?" Miles snapped. He grabbed the evidence bag, lifted it toward the river, and said, "The fabric is dry. The necklace wasn't broken. Her bag wasn't waterlogged. Look at the signs. Someone planted these things." His voice cracked again at the word someone, but he powered through it. "They're sending messages. And if they're sending messages, she's alive." That statement didn't come from hope. It came from certainty. A crazed prankster or a calculated enemy. And no one knows. While the officers regrouped and radioed updates, the fishermen nearby whispered to each other, pointing subtly at Miles. Some of them recognized him, some didn't, but every single one of them recognized his expression, a man balancing on the edge of something he might not return from. The captain walked to Miles again. "We're expanding our search radius. We'll check both the forest side and upstream. But we also need—" "No," Miles cut in. "You need to release the CCTV from last night." The captain stiffened. "We can't release. Not to the public."
To me.
"Miles, I'll find something you missed." The captain hesitated. Because deep down, he knew Miles was probably right. No one on that riverbank, including the police, believed this was a simple missing person case anymore. Not when the evidence looked like it had been placed. Not when every detail aligned with the stalker who had been escalating for weeks. Not when the man standing before them was unraveling like prophecy. The trigger that changes everything. Tracks in the mud just when the atmosphere was finally beginning to settle. A shout echoed from the left side of the river. "Footprints. We have footprints." Miles ran faster than any officer there. 3 tracks. Half erased. Leading from the forest edge toward the river. One set was small, likely Shen Yue's. Another set was heavy, deep, masculine. The third was faint, as if someone had been dragged or pushed. Miles crouched down, eyes tracing the prints with terrifying focus. Then he gasped. Not loudly, quietly, the way a person gasps when the truth finally pierces through denial. The captain knelt beside him. Do you see something? Miles nodded once, then lifted his gaze slowly, pupils blown wide with recognition. I know these footprints. The captain's blood ran cold. What do you mean you know them? I've seen this pattern before, Miles whispered. This spacing, this pressure, this angle. I've seen this exact footprint. Where? Miles closed his eyes and murmured, in front of Shen Yue's apartment the night of the break-in. Everyone went silent. It wasn't a random attacker. It wasn't a criminal passing by. It wasn't a stalker who suddenly escalated. This person had been building toward this for weeks. Every camera disabled. Every threat delivered. Every intrusion escalating. Every message handwritten.
And now, kidnapping.
Miles stood. Slowly. Deliberately. As if rising from his old self entirely. He turned to the captain. And with a voice deep enough to freeze every officer in place, he said, Stop searching the river. Mr. Wei, she's not in the water. He stepped toward the forest. She was taken. Another step. And I'm going to find her. Another. With or without your team. No one tried to stop him. Because the look in his eyes wasn't hope. It was war.